Hello everyone, this is Stjepan from Hanging Pawns. Today I'm going to go over a very instructive game in the Panov variation of the Caro-Kann. It was played between Hou Yifan and Liren in the Tata Steel Tournament in 2015. Hou Yifan opened with 1e4, we have c6, the Caro-Kann, d4, d5, e takes d5, and c takes d5, and here Hou Yifan plays the Panov variation with c4. The idea of the Panov is to immediately strike at the black's attempt to form a center, or have any initiative in the center, and for white to gain the initiative, but often at the cost of getting an isolated d pawn or even sacrificing the c pawn for white. Panov is definitely double-edged, but it's still one of the best responses to the Caro-Kann if white is playing for a win. So c4, knight f6. Black plays knight f6, defending his d pawn and developing a piece. We have knight c3, knight c6, and bishop g5. White plays bishop g5, trying to remove the second defender of d4, so if black doesn't react, white could play bishop takes f6, e takes f6, and then c takes d5, or knight takes d5 would win a pawn for white. And black plays bishop e6, defending the pawn. He could also play e6, the downside of which is that the bishop would remain undeveloped on c8, which is not bad, and it's also a theoretical move. And the reason why bishop e6 is only played after bishop g5 is because attacking the f6 knight is that the g5 square is unavailable for a maneuver knight f3 to g5 attacking the e6 bishop, which would be a loss of tempo for black. Here Hou Yifan plays a strange move, knight g to e2, developing the knight with a different idea but leaving the c4 pawn undefended. The c4 pawn is taken and the knight goes to f4, attacking the e6 bishop from the second available square but leaving yet another pawn undefended. This was probably calculated well by Hou Yifan, and her reasoning was that she will gain a better position and more active pieces than black's in exchange for black's extra double d pawn in the end of the variation. Black of course should oblige to her plans because moving the bishop would justify the pawn sacrifice. So we have knight takes d4 and knight takes the bishop on e6, so temporarily gaining the bishop pair, and knight takes e6, of course not taking with the f pawn, because you don't want to double your pawns for no reason, also gaining a tempo on the bishop on g5. We have bishop c4, and after the knight captures on d4, knight captures on e6, knight captures on e6, white regains one of her pawns, and the queens get exchanged with queen d1, rook takes d1 check, and rook takes d1. Here black plays a6, an excellent restraining move, taking away key checking squares from the white bishop. We have bishop e6, and the bishop doesn't have a better option but to damage black's pawn structure and to double his e-pawn. This is, I believe, what Hou Yifan has calculated before playing knight g2. The question is, has she miscalculated, or did she believe she stood better in this position, which is, I think, hard to believe. F takes e6 and white castles. After bishop e6, f takes e6 and white castling, the opening phase is, we could say, over, and black has equalized and even stands a bit better. The computer wouldn't say that black is much better, it's perhaps minus 0.2 or something, but the position seems easier to play for black, in my opinion. We have h6, asking the bishop to move and gaining space on the king side. The bishop retreats to c1, and we have g5, gaining even more space and perhaps planning to put the king on f7 or g6, so making it a bit safer and bring it up the board in the endgame, which is always good. White plays f4, responding to black's threats, trying to disrupt Liren's plans and still trying to prove the compensation for the lost pawn. And we have g4, avoiding the trade and expanding further. Taking the pawn on f4 would be favorable for white, definitely, because the f-file would open for white's rook on f1, and the black king would be much less safe. White here plays knight a4, preparing to place the knight on either b6, blocking black's king side, or on c5, much more active square than c3. Rook c8 is played by black, activating the rook. Not fearing knight b6 because it could be answered by putting the rook on the second rank with rook c2 eventually. And we have b4. b4, as I said, prepares the square on c5 for the knight and expands and gains some space on the queen side. Black here plays king f7, tucking his king away, preparing to connect his rooks, develop the bishop, etc, etc, and knight c5. Here, black plays b6, offering the a6 pawn, but it's relatively safe to take in some way, but the a2 pawn would fall soon after rook a8, knight c7, rook takes a2, and probably knight b5. Here the knight doesn't take, it retreats to knight d3, and she centralizes her knight and doesn't bother exchanging the a2 pawn for the b6 pawn. Here, Liren plays knight d7, a move I can't really understand. Apart from preventing the white knight from coming to e5, there is no purpose to it at all. And even if the knight does come to e5, we check, the black king could go to f6 or g7, which was the plan anyway. And I think a much better square would have been d5, from where the knight would control several key squares. White responds with bishop to e3, so threatening now knight e5 check, knight e5, and bishop taking on b6. After f takes c5 we check because it would open the rook to the king on f7, and black defends the pawn with b5. White plays knight e5 anyway, and we have knight e5. After f takes c5 we check, the king goes to g6. We have rook to d7, activating the rook and preventing the bishop from developing, but black plays bishop to g7 anyway, sacrificing the e7 pawn. And of course, rook e7, bishop e5 would fail to rook takes e6 and lose the bishop, so white plays rook e8. And with rook e8 defending the pawn, the position is much more favorable for black. White plays rook a7, we have rook c6 defending the a pawn and the e pawn, rook c1 activating the rook e c8, doubling his rooks and initiating an exchange, which happens. And after bishop d4, the material is equal. Black has given back the extra pawn, but his pieces stand much better than white's, and what's most important, the king is much more active. Black's advantage has significantly increased in spite of white gaining material equality. The black king can easily infiltrate white's position if pieces get exchanged with king f5 to e4 or something, so white has to be on the lookout and try to avoid trading if possible. We have h5, a3, bishop h6, activating the bishop and highlighting the weak pawns on a3 and b4. White's rook may seem active, but it's in reality prevented from defending white's position, and it isn't really accomplishing much in the attack. We have bishop c5, preventing the rook from blocking the white king out with an eventual rook c2, should the white rook move, and bishop f4. And now bishop c5 might have been a good move to some extent, but it allows bishop f4 and losing the e5 pawn, which is now really hard to defend. The move I was looking at in this position was, instead of bishop c5, to play rook d7 with the plan of putting the rook on d6 and trading, but the resulting endgame would favor black as well. We have h3, gaining a tempo, you might say, and the exchange happens with gh3, and bishop takes on e5. We have rook d7 now, after losing the pawn, which I really don't understand, because it would have surely been better to play it a few moves ago. We have rook d3, e5, king goes to f2, e4, rook b3, bishop c1, rook c3, bishop b2, always repeat, rook b3, bishop c1, and rook c3. And now after bishop g5, black has clearly even improved his position even more. We have king e2, king f5, a4, bishop e7, attacking the c5 bishop, which can't move due to the pin on the rook. A takes b5, a takes b5, and king e3. Now white trades on b5, black recaptures, and white plays king e3, activating his king. This position is already completely lost for white, even though it's only a pawn up, because the pawns are all on light squares, which means that the bishop can't attack them, and that the black bishop is able to move freely without being restricted by his own pawns. Liren plays bishop c5 here, and he decides that the rook endgame is even more favorable, and he's right, he trades on c5 and pawn takes on c5. King e5, rook c1, king d5, rook d1 check, king c5, king takes e4, rook e6 check, king f4, b4, and now it's a simple endgame, simple rook endgame, a pawn up, with the white's king being restricted and unable to defend the b1 square, the queening square for the b4 pawn, it's completely lost. She should have resigned here. Rook c1 check, king b5, rook b1, rook to g6, rook to e1, b3, rook to e5 check, king b4. The king is moving up the board, herding the b pawn to queening. Rook e8, b2, rook b8 check, king c3, rook c8 check, king b3, rook b8 check, king c2, rook c8 check, king b1, and it's completely over after rook h8, rook b6. She resigned. This is easily winning because black can build a bridge with his rook if any checks would occur, with, for example, rook b3, some random move for white like king c2, and then king c2, rook c8, and rook c6 blocking the white rook and defending the queening square on b1. So yeah, definitely an instructive game which shows that the Panov can be double-edged and dangerous for white and for black, and if both sides aren't careful, there are a lot of opening traps you could fall into. Alright everyone, thanks for watching. I hope you found this helpful and that it will either help you get some ideas on how to win in the Panov against the Caro-Kann by correcting Hou Yifan's mistakes, or give you a lesson on how the Caro should be played against c4 variations. Cheers everyone, bye, have a nice day.